We're talking today with Dotun Reju, who is the founding pastor of Kingdom Citizens Pavilion in Jos, Nigeria. Welcome.
Yeah.
You know, Kingdom Citizens Pavilion is kind of an unusual name for a church. How did it come to have that name?
Well, I've always had people ask me that kind of question. That name came out of my study years ago of the book of Matthew. You know, Matthew chapter 5, that was when I discovered the centrality of the kingdom in the gospel that Jesus preached. So when I looked at that, I just realized that it's just like being a citizen of a country. And being an African, I also, have a very unique understanding of what a kingdom is. Because historically speaking, we've lived under monarchies. And a citizen of a kingdom is a reflection of the values, the personality, and the principles of the king that rules in that kingdom. So basically, I then concluded that what Jesus Christ actually came to raise is a community of citizens of his kingdom. So that's where that name actually came about, that believers are actually supposed to operate like citizens of a kingdom where Jesus is the king. And then that scripture in the book of Psalms came up and said, in the time of trouble, he will hide me in his pavilion from the strife of tongues. So that's how the pavilion came, and we joined in that. This is a pavilion, for kingdom citizens. Yeah,
I know that you're a great believer in the priesthood of all believers. And in
absolutely.
your experience, how does a church that recognizes and conforms with the priesthood of all believers, how does that church differ from so many churches?
Yeah, first of all, the glaring difference is that in a church that recognizes the priesthood of all believers in real terms, in real tangible terms, you discover that titles are downplayed. Titles like pastor, reverend, prophet, they are kind of downplayed. You never see a situation where it is the pastor that prays for the people. People pray together. In most churches around, there's a very clear demarcation between the leader and the led. But in a church that values the universal, the priesthood of all believers, those things are based on function rather than titles.
I know you have accountability groups in Kingdom Citizens Pavilion. What do those involve? How are they formed, and that sort of thing?
Well, the accountability groups, first of all, because it's a universal priesthood, we value common accountability and mentoring. How can we act as checks on one another? And then because priests also basically represent God in their societies, we kind of ask ourselves the question, how do we go into our societies? How do we go into the world? We need to go with something. And what we discovered was that it's our professions, it's our careers. We gather people of like professions and passions together for mutual accountability and for mutual benefit. What are you going through in your own office, in your own kind of place of work? What can we learn from that? What challenges, what opportunities exist there? How can the person who works in company A or organization A or organization B learn from the guy that works in organization C? Okay, we have ideally 4. We have the health, education, arts, and business. Yes. So each of these groups, we also come up with a community project. I'll give you an example. The education accountability group, they've come up with a reading project. Because our church is close to a slum where there's high level of, like illiteracy, and things like that. So they come up with a reading clinic. The long-term project is to build a library in that community so that they bring their skill as teachers, educators, to teach people there how to read and write, even without going to a formal school. Right now, the business group, they're actually trying to set up a pilot farm they want to set up a farm where they can train small scale farmers, and in the middle of all that, they're actually interacting with these people. The purpose is not to bring them to our church. The purpose is to take the church to them. But we've seen a lot of them really, get saved, come to the saving knowledge of Christ. So that's how those groups kind of function.
You also have community pastors. How are they related to the accountability groups, and how are they chosen?
Yeah, the leaders of the accountability groups are the community pastors. In fact, each group actually function like a micro church, like a micro local church. So through those groups, it is, in fact, those leaders are actually, they emerge from the groups. The groups actually come up with those who are going to lead them. So activities, events like naming children, baptism, they are done on the level of those groups. Someone wants to get married. If you want to get married, the first person that will know is the community pastor, is your AGF leader, who is the pastor. He basically provides pastoral care for those groups. And those functions are actually skill driven. The person needs to have the particular skill set, the kind of emotional kind of bent to be able to function in those roles. So for instance, if that group wants to have a Bible study, it doesn't really mean that the leader will be the one who coordinates or who leads it. It's someone within that group who has the kind of skill to moderate a Bible study. So leadership is highly adaptive within those groups, but somebody coordinates and that person is the community pastor.
Let's say that a community pastor is over the education group. The community pastor would him or herself be an educator. Is that right?
Yeah, because it belongs to that group. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we believe that the way to disciple an educator should be distinctly different and unique from the way you disciple a doctor. The way we disciple, we take the mission field into consideration. What we've discovered most times in other churches is that we disciple people to be functional within the church, so that they can be good ushers, good choir member, good Bible study attendees. But we disciple for that and also for where they spend most of their waking moments. We take their places of work into consideration when we disciple them.
How often do these groups, these community accountability groups, how often do they come together?
Okay, on the level of the leadership, the leadership of the church, they are expected to meet once a month. But on their own level, they have other meetings. So they have potlucks where they just meet to just have fun, maybe eat together. Somebody celebrating birthday. If any of them is having maybe like a wedding anniversary, it's an opportunity for them to meet, So they have that statutory one meeting in a month in the church calendar. But they are also expected to have other meetings. And then the leadership of each of these accountability groups also meet with me for orientation, for feedback, for training, maybe once in a quarter.
When you all come together once a month, do you have several teaching pastors then, or teaching elders, or how does that work?
First Sunday of every month is the whole church family Sunday. We have stories from the accountability group fellowships. So there are some, spotlight stories that will be highlighted. That this week we'll be hearing from somebody from the education AGF, we'll be hearing from someone from the health AGF, we'll be hearing some other praise reports, maybe from families. Somebody wants to talk, maybe they are celebrating. So it's like a community gathering. It's really very life-giving. It makes the church come alive, because everybody sees themselves that what you learn, you are going to be held responsible and accountable for it. And what you teach, you are also able to get a feedback that what you are teaching actually is producing fruit.
So you really, then the whole congregation gets an opportunity to see what God is doing in the community
Absolutely.
across a whole variety of workplace situations.
Absolutely.
It's not simply something that God did, 2,000 years ago, but it's what God is doing right now.
What is still doing right now? Absolutely.
In the community. Yeah. Now, I think you commission people. Tell us about the commissioning and how do they take this to heart on the job?
Yeah, we call everyone, in the church. Maybe you've gone through your education and you graduate, or you've gone through maybe a vocational training and you graduate, or maybe you go for the mandatory post-university national service. So what we do is we take them through a kind of an orientation, which is basically inspired by my teaching of theology of work. We take them so that where the next phase of your life is a call to ministry. And we let them understand that this is not in any way different from what many churches know as ordination. But that the only difference here is that there is no title that's attached to it. And number two, you are not necessarily being sent to go and serve maybe in a local church. But that our orientation here is that we don't go to church. Church goes to places. So then we have a special Sunday service where these people are presented before the whole congregation and prayed for and actually commissioned, and they are deployed, to where we believe God is sending. So they are made to understand that where they are going to, it's not just that they're getting a job, that they're actually going into ministry. So these guys are called the Invader Squad because we believe they are going to invade their worlds with the gospel, primarily with lifestyle and work quality.
Who serves on your teaching team, and how many are on that team, and what are their qualifications?
Well, it's not in terms of qualification, again, it's in terms of skill. Everyone in the church, they have the opportunity to express themselves, in all ways. But for now, it's myself and three others that actually we know that they have verifiable teaching gift. For us as the leader, what we do is we observe what is this person's strength. So, and it's highly, it's highly flexible. And we always want to raise up fresh minds who will come into that kind of a teaching office. Fresh minds who will, go into the pastoral office. So we basically use the fivefold ministry offices to let people on this. So we define those offices and let people do like a self-appraisal. And then we also watch that this person really, has a particular gift in this kind of area. So is basically not qualification. It's something that they grow into over time.
So you don't have a frozen number of appointed teachers with that title, but it's a flexible,
very flexible,
where you recognize what people's giftings are, and you draw upon them as the Spirit leads in the gifting. Yeah. We mentioned the reports from the accountability groups. How has the congregation responded to these reports?
It's a Sunday that everybody looks forward to, because they are not going to be bored with my long preaching. That's number one. And then, but it kind of gives everyone like a sense of belonging. And what I feel personally is that people might have some issues in their own life, and to hear other people talk about something that sounds like what they are going through is very encouraging. We have actually demystified Sunday, because the gospel that we received from the West, as the way it was given to us, it was very Sunday oriented. We still value Sunday, but we see it in terms of opportunity to come and connect. We have also demystified what we call church wedding. If you get married in your living room, it's not inferior to when you get married in this building. So we have been able to demystify the building, demystify Sunday, and we use every opportunity to engage with our culture. That God doesn't live in this building. It's only church when we are here. And everywhere we are, that becomes the church. I said it's like the American president. Any kind of aircraft he enters becomes Air Force One. What makes the aircraft Air Force One is the presence of the American president.
I know you're familiar with the United States. You mentioned our president, and you've been here a number of times, right?
Yeah.
How would you suggest that in our culture, we can incorporate some of the things that you've discovered there?
What I've seen in the American experience is that we've taken the individualism to a very negative extent. We don't value community. Again, we're not accountable to each other in the way we should. And putting that in context, especially in terms of current realities, I think because of that, the church in America, they are fast losing their society. And what can solve that problem is to begin to emphasize where Christians spend most of their waking moments. We need to value where we really live, which is in the workplace. We need to know how to really engage that place. It's not a Sunday kind of thing. That's one thing America can learn. They can learn from Africa in terms of community, where we really come together, where they value community, and then they need to demystify Sunday.